don't mind me asking?
I'm on your newsletter.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I really, really appreciate it. Are y'all okay with the gnats not bothering y'all too much? How many people have planted onions before? 1, 2? Anybody else? No? What was your experience with the onions?
I don't know. Mine was like kind of small.
Okay.
This past season they were like real tiny. Last year I got it kind of decent. This is like my third year.
Your third year? Okay, so he said that his was getting pretty small, or harvesting pretty small. What time of year did you plant them?
Spring. And that's why I didn't know that you can do it in the fall until now.
Yeah.
So I think that's gonna have a big difference because I never planted. I see them all the starts coming out in the springtime. So I said, all right, must be the time to do it. This is the first year I was like, you can do it in the fall. And I think I'm gonna get bigger onions.
So onions grow during, they like the long hours, they grow bigger in cool weather, which we do not have long hours, cool weather. Our hours start decreasing about November, they get real low, and then they start increasing again in February. But having said that, that's the only time we have to plant, because you can't plant these in the summertime. It's just way too hot. So down here, if you want a bigger onion, you'd plant about now. It'll give it enough time to go all the way until next year. Now, if you don't mind a spring onion, which is exactly the same thing, it just depends on how and when you plant it, and really when you pick it too. So if you want a big onion, you start now and feed. If it doesn't eat, it will not grow. Somebody else said they planted onions before. Yes, what was your experience with them?
We did. We planted them in the fall, November, late November, and we used a variety called Grain X.
Yeah.
And out of Texas.
Okay. Did they do pretty good?
They did very well.
Great. How big were they when you harvested them?
Baseball size.
Small size?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when did you plant them?
Right at the end of November, 1st of December.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Now I'm down on the coast from here, so it's
a little different.
A little bit different.
A little bit different. And I like how they said their onions were small, and both of them did like this. This is what you're gonna get here in the South. If you're up north where the climate is cooler, you've got long hours, you got cool weather, you got full sun, you know. So our hours go down to 6, and it's just like kind of zapping a little bit of the fertilizer away, a little bit of the energy away from them. So here, stuff that sometimes say 90 days, like broccoli. If you're planting in the South, we're planting during the winter, low sunlight hours, it's going to take longer to do. Now, having said that, do not get discouraged by onions, because I say just plant a whole bunch of onions, and I really prefer them when they're not super big. You can just go right out, pick them up. I eat potatoes almost every morning. I'm a vegetarian, and potatoes are my meat. I mean, it just gives me so much energy to get throughout the day. Because you can imagine here, we don't have time to really stop much and sit down and eat something. So I eat, about 5 o'clock in the morning, some potatoes. That'll last me till about 3 o'clock. Now, why I'm telling you this is because I love onions on my potatoes. And it's so great just to walk right outside and be able to pull up an onion, cut it with some scissors, and put it right on top of the onions. It's just, right on top of the potatoes. It's really, really good. So don't think you have to wait for the onion to get gigantic to use it. And it's $5 a pound, so you get 60 onions for a pound. So there's no reason not to plant a whole lot, and they don't take up a whole lot of room either. Does anybody like spring onions a lot? Yes? The biggest reason to have the bigger onions is probably for like hamburgers, is what you're thinking, right? Hamburgers? Yeah, so it fills up. So that makes a lot of sense. And it will happen in the South, it just takes a lot longer. So to start with, when you plant, how many people are planting in the ground and how many people are planting in beds?
I'm doing both.
You're doing both?
Beds.
Both?
Oh, raised bed.
Raised beds?
Both.
Both?
Beds, yeah.
Yeah.
And to try the ground, the sand.
The ground. The sand, we're going to change that sand.
A bed.
A bed?
Beds.
Beds?
Beds.
Beds? Okay, cool deal. The one good thing about onions is not too many predators take them. You know, so you can plant them out, not worry about voles eating them, which is great. So raised bed, ground is good. They need loose dirt though. So the sand is good for the loose dirt, but you're just gonna also have to add compost to it. So sand is not living soil. Sand, it provides a lot of drainage, but you're gonna have to add some compost to it. I would say black cow would be great for sand. What kind of, you're planting in the ground?
Yeah.
And what kind of soil you got? Sandy?
It's sandy loam.
Sandy loam. Yeah, so anytime you can compost, you can do your own compost, or black cow works so good. Now if you got clay, you're probably gonna have to really dig it out and then backfill with some good dirt. We like the Sungrow 3B mix mixed with the black cow. Now if you're doing a bed, a raised bed, we like the Sungrow 3B mix. It's just a professional potting soil. It's really nice and fluffy and just gorgeous. For onions, you're going to do 1 Sungrow to 1 black cow and mix those up. And depending on the bed is how far you would go with it. Has anybody used the Sungrow and black cow before? I know you have. Anybody else? No? It's amazing. Now the Sungrow's initial cost, it's a big bag about like this big. But once you get it in there, each season you're just going to be adding the compost to it. So it's an initial cost up front. So a bag right now costs $22. Black cow costs $8.50. But you need to invest in the soil. That's really important. And if you can't invest in soil, then go lower, because if you don't have good soil, you're not going to have good plants. Each year you need to each season you need to recompost. Briefly, what compost is where the microbes have digested vegetable matter and different types of matter like leaves. So the compost is fantastic. So you're putting the microbes in there, and for lack of better words, you're putting their poo in there. But then the microbes don't have anything else to eat. So you've put the plant in the ground, and it's got that poo and it's got some nutrition, but we're asking it to do a lot, right? We're asking it to produce for us. So you've got to fertilize, and you're not actually fertilizing that plant, you're fertilizing the microbes, and then they work together. So your soil needs to be alive is kind of what I'm saying. And your compost, you've got microbes breaking all that stuff down. And once they break it down, it looks nice and black. They have ate everything in the refrigerator, and they've got to have more. Y'all understand what? Any questions about that?
Is this stuff you sell here?
I do sell it here, yes. And like I said, you can do your own compost too. That's fine. We compost everything. If you see over here, we got a big pile of horse manure. We just pile it up. When it gets to a certain size, we start in another area. And then when it's good and black, it's ready to go in. And if you're composting, keep it simple. People are like, oh, you got to go out there with a pitchfork and you got to turn it and you got to, you know, a lot of people don't have time for that stuff, and then they're like, this is too complicated, I don't want to do it. Just find a place and pile stuff up, you know. To cut down on the flies, add leaf matter. Leaf really cuts down on flies because it takes some of the moisture out and puts a little bit more stuff in there, and also the phosphorus is the word I was looking for. And also the grass clippings will increase the nitrogen in there, and that'll cut down on a lot of the fly larvae too. So both of those, pretty much put it way out there where you don't have to smell it. And if you don't like your neighbors, put it next to them, you know. But seriously, yeah, gardening's a little stinky. It just is. But that good stinky stuff is what feeds our plants. So, getting to onions, and then I'll talk about fertilizing. A lot of people try. How deep do you bury an onion? We're gonna just take a poll.
Not that deep.
Not that deep. Don't know. Don't know.
They're going.
He said that. At least I wasn't your middle finger.
That's it.
Anybody else? No? Okay, so an onion needs to sit right on top of the earth. Just like that. And as the roots start taking off, it's going to try to get that onion into the ground. And what you're going to want to do is keep pulling that dirt out. Because if it goes down like this and it's touching that dirt, it's not going to get any bigger than that right there. So it is a little work. I like to take, I use my hands a lot of times, but a paintbrush works too, you know. So every couple weeks go out there and brush the dirt back off of them. So you add dirt to potatoes, but you take away the dirt from the onions. Any questions about that? No?
Does that vermiculate in your soil too?
No.
No.
I used a 3B mix. It's got everything in it.
Okay.
And then I ain't got to be running around.
Okay,
And it's
got it.
actually cheaper because if you think about it, you get a big bag of vermiculite, you're going to use this much.
Right.
So, you know, we do sell
It
vermiculite
comes
here.
in that mix.
Yeah, it's got
Okay.
it's got everything in it you need. I mean,
Gotcha.
it is just so nice and fluffy. I'm gonna let y'all experience in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just really light and fluffy. And like I said, mix it. If you have something that doesn't need a lot of drainage, like tomatoes, peppers that don't need the drainage, we do 1 sun grow to 2 cows. But something like potatoes, onions, we use 1 cow to 1 sun grow. And that just keeps it from getting too moist because these do not like moisture. And one of the biggest things that I see that people do to destroy their onions is watering too much. These don't like a whole lot of water. Now, having said that, if it could get about 1 inch of water spread out through the whole week. So if you want to come out here and water just a little bit, just drip, 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 that's fine. But do not sit there with a water hose because you'll kill your onions real quick. I don't especially care to have a gigantic onion, so I barely even water. I just sit it and then just forget about it other than fertilizing once a month. Do you have any questions about that?
So what do you fertilize with? Once a
Yeah.
month? More of the 3B and the,
No, that's not fertilizer.
that's not fertilizer.
That's
okay.
its home.
That's its home, okay.
Yeah. So your home's got a refrigerator and it's got some stuff in the refrigerator. And then you put your plants in there and they eating it all up. So the microbes are starving again. So I use organic tomato tone for everything. Just about everything. I can't even think of one thing I don't use it for. And if you look on this bag, it says tomato and vegetable food. So they have garden tone in a green bag and this in a red bag. That's just so you buy 2 different bags. It really, yeah. I like this because it's got a little bit more calcium in it. So I do like this and just a little bit more of everything in it, really. And this is once a month. We also have a video on YouTube on how to make your own fertilizer using the weeds and stuff that you just take out of the garden. And it's real easy to do. I won't go into a big thing about that, but because you can watch it on there real easy. So yeah. And when we get the onions in the bed, I'm going to show you exactly how to use that.
Are you continuing to water over winter?
I don't do a whole lot of watering. If you do, just keep in mind it needs to an area about this big, it needs about 1 inch of water for the whole week. So don't come out here and water 1 inch in one day.
Okay.
If your goal is a big onion, you know, you're going to have to be a little bit more vigilant. I'd say 3 times a week, 4 times a week maybe. Just come out, sprinkle it a little bit. And a lot of people are like, okay, there's going to be a big rainstorm and my onions are going to die and, you know, what's the difference? Well, the difference is if you have well water or city water, it doesn't have nitrogen in it. And even if you have water in rain barrels, which is great, it's good and it's neutral, it doesn't have any heavy metals or anything in it. The nitrogen is volatile and it comes out immediately. So rainwater is great, but don't think of it as rainwater, because after you get it into that container, the nitrogen's popping back out. So when it rains, it's essentially fertilizing the plants for you. So that's causing the plant to grow and use that water. So yes, if it rains for 2 or 3 weeks, you might have some problems. But as long as you have it where you have real good drainage, you're most likely going to be okay. February seems to be monsoon season now. So you might wait, if you want to plant a late crop of onions, you may wait till after February, after the monsoons come, and yeah. But I plant onions, you know, all the time except for the summertime. I plant them from now until about March. And like I said, you can eat them at any size. And one thing I want to touch base, this is new to me this year. I've never seen people do this, but it seems to be like a virus or something. People are taking the tomato tone, which is supposed to last for the whole month, putting it out, and then sitting there and watering it in until it disappears. Well, that defeats the whole purpose, and it over fertilizes your crops. This is, you know, I don't know if anybody have fish and you go out of town and you have that little cube and you sit it on the fish tank and it feeds the fish while you're out of town. This is like that. This is, you do it once a month and then it feeds for the whole month. So you just water like normally. Don't make it disappear, because your onions will cry instead of you crying for chopping your onions. So what I'm going to do is show you, and I think if y'all want to come up closer, come on over. So if I'm going to plant in this bed, we're just going to put them,
Oh, wow.
yep, just right on top. Now, if you want a big onion, people are going to say this is spaced too close together. That's, I would say, about 2 inches. Well, then when this one's ready and you want a spring onion, just pop that one out and leave these 2 here to get bigger.
Oh.
So, just pop them right in the ground like that. Anybody want to grab some onions and help? Come on. I need onions for my potatoes. I think I was telling y'all this morning, my mom's like, you smell like onions. I was like, well, I eat onions every day.
So you just plant them,
Go right ahead.
you plant them from now till March, and you keep planting them as you pull them up so that you have a continual supply.
Well, you need to plant all you want right now, because there's not going to be, you can't just keep going to the store and getting them. They don't store very, very well, so they get kind of mushy and all that stuff. So we try to get everything in the ground, you know, this month.
Okay.
Yes. Some people have planted a little bit earlier, but if you do that, we had, you know, 3 days of really hot weather.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to suffer a little bit. Sometimes seed out. Where if they were bigger, let's say you plant them in August,
Mm-hmm.
and it's super hot, they're going to grow real quick, but then they're going to get the seed head on them,
Mm-hmm.
and after that they're going to stop growing, because now they're making babies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're planting them in the winter time, so they don't try to make babies, because we want to eat them, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So you can do this whole bed like this. Very, very important to keep it weed free. The weeds will take the nutrients away from your onions. So keep it weed free. If you get grass, in our video on making your own fertilizer, we just have a 5-gallon bucket, and when we pull the weeds, we put it in that 5-gallon bucket and fill it with some non-chlorinated water. Now, if you're own city water, if you let the water sit for 8 hours, it will not be chlorinated anymore.
Okay.
So pull your weeds, put it in that bucket, fill it up, put a little yeast or a little beer in there, just a little bit, and don't waste too much beer. You don't need it for gardening after your back hurts from pulling all the weeds, right? But anyway, then every 3 days water with that, and you're going to get the biggest onions, because that's got your nitrogen and everything in there. And I use that and this right here together.
So you put your weeds in a bucket with water that is non-chlorinated, and
Yep.
then you feed your soil with that.
You forgot one step.
Your yeast.
The beer or the yeast.
Yes.
Okay.
And what it does is it just starts the compost. It's not really compost. It's kind of in between. So that water is going to be more like a fertilizer, and it's just going to feed those microbes, and they're going to be all happy. And then your onion's going to put some sugar into the soil to attract the microbes, and it's just going to get a whole symbiotic relationship.
How much beer again?
Like I said, don't waste too much. No, just like that's fine. You can put a whole thing in there if you want to. It's you know how old beer stinks? That's the yeast digesting everything in there.
And would like worm tea essentially do the same thing?
Worm tea would get it started too, yes. Handful of black cow in there. Anytime you can get some of the microbes, you're just introducing the bacteria in there to get the stuff started. And then I let it sit there for 3 days. If it's real cold, it might take 4 days. If you leave it there for 2 weeks, it's going to stink real bad, which is not a big, gigantic problem, but it is hard to get that smell off of you. So again, that neighbor that you don't like, pour it, not on them, just out. No, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, and if you have a compost bin and you let that stuff sit there till it gets too stinky, you could just take that and pour it on your compost bin, because you're just introducing bacteria back to the compost. So we want everything alive. This is just creating a living soil is what you want.
And if you used yeast, how much yeast would you put in a bucket?
Like a half a teaspoon
Half a
would be
teaspoon.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have to strain it like the weeds, or the weeds already decompose?
They'll start decomposing. That process, as long as it's got a little bit of smell to it, it's going to ferment that seeds and they're not going to come up. Now, if you got something highly invasive, just don't risk it, But yeah, most of the seed heads, is not going to last in that water for 3 days with the yeast. It's going to start decomposing. And it just gets it halfway decomposing so the microbes can do the rest. Yeah, and then feed back feed the plants. And anybody have any questions about that?
Would vermicompost, would that count as fertilizer to apply, or is that more for just
Are you
the
talking
bed?
about just worms? The worms?
Yeah.
The worm, it actually, if you do some research, it's got a 1-1-1 ratio.
Okay.
So it's got 1% nitrogen, approximately 1% phosphorus, 1% potash. On any bag of fertilizer, it's going to have the analysis somewhere. Now this is a 3-4-6, but what you got to think about is this feeds for the whole month, So yes, the vermiculture is good. It's fantastic for creating a living soil, but and breaking down stuff like leaves because it's introducing the bacteria. But as a fertilizer, it's not a fertilizer.
Okay.
It helps create fertilizer, but it's not exactly fertilizer.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool deal. There was something I wanted to. Oh, okay. So a lot of people think onions are just a root crop. It's more akin to a grass. So that's why you want your digits to be kind of, 5, 3, 6. You don't want nitrogen up to like 10, 15. There's a certain thing I can't say on air because they sent me a letter and said I can't. But there's something that everybody goes to the big box stores and gets, and they're like, oh, this is great. It's making it grow so much, but it's so high in nitrogen. All you're doing is getting leaves. So nitrogen grows the leaves. Who knows what phosphorus grows?
The bulb.
The bulb, or no, the root and the fruit. I'm sorry, the stem and the fruit and the flowers. Yeah, you were close. And then the potash is what grows the root. So the first one's the nitrogen, then phosphorus. I did say phosphorus, didn't I? Okay, phosphorus, and then potash is going to be the chemical analysis. So if you want something like greens, collards, what do you need a high number of? Nitrogen, exactly. If you're doing potatoes, a root crop, what do you need high?
Potash.
Yes. So you're still going to want to have something that's got everything in it. But then you'll just adjust it per crop. So I like this as a good basis, and then I'll add some potash or some ashes from like your wood fireplace to potatoes. So you're always just going to add a little bit more. So the onions need a little bit more nitrogen. That's why making your own fertilizer helps out a lot with that. It's not going to burn it. It's ready to use. It just goes right on there. Now the stuff's going to be stinky, so when you're getting close to wanting to eat your onions, just make sure you don't pour it straight on there, because you are introducing bacteria to the onions. Now, I don't worry about it. I wash it. I'm a country girl. But if you're concerned about that, take the cup and just water down like that. Just real easy. And you just want to water an inch down into the soil. So if you're watering this bed, you're not going to sit here and just water. Like, don't be on your phone and watering. That's the number one thing I see that people do. They're on their phone and they're like, I don't water too much. And I'm looking at them like, shh. Yeah. No. Pay attention, especially if you're a first-time gardener and you're learning this. I found a good way of learning how to water. Does anybody have problems, they think, with watering? Because that's the number one thing I see that people are doing wrong. Yes. Have some problems with watering? You think you water too much, not enough, or just you don't? You just don't know.
I put to rest succulents, so I don't know.
Well, succulents definitely don't need to hardly nothing. Yes. There's probably some succulents that need more, but yeah. So get a 5-gallon bucket and get your hose and your sprayer you normally use. Come out there and cut it on and count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. When it gets to an inch, think about that concept and how many seconds it took to get there. And if you do this for a few weeks, you're not going to have to do it anymore because your muscle memory is going to go into it and you're going to be fine. But just for like the first week, take that 5-gallon bucket, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, see where an inch comes to. Now, you know it took on your sprayer, let's say 30 seconds. So you're going to come back to this garden and you're going to picture that 5-gallon bucket right here. And you're going to sit there, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, however it is. And then next 5-gallon bucket. And next, you're not literally going to have a 5-gallon bucket, but you're just going to be thinking of that in your head. And after you do that a few times, it's going to help you out. And like I said, you're going to get muscle memory. Now, don't water your onions like this every day. Do those, like I said, a whole inch for the week. So that means you're not going to be watering too much. You're pretty much just going to be sprinkling about 1/4 of an inch down. Any questions about that? Nobody?
What do you water with? Do you have like a good sprayer that has like a gentle shower type spray?
I do.
Or you use a watering can?
I normally don't use a watering can because it gets clogged up and I get aggravated and then I throw it. Yeah, not anybody, just in the general direction. So I just use a regular water hose. It's got I like the shower. And then sometimes I'll turn it down just a little bit depending on the size of the plant and how delicate it is. Yes, and that's a good question.
So when you're watering onions, do you let the water get on the onions or do you focus down on the dirt?
You're watering so little bit, you don't, you can get it on there.
Okay.
Yeah. So the worst thing to see is the onions just soaked, and they'll immediately, you'll see them going they'll be very, very unhappy. Yeah, don't do that. Full sun, they need all the sun they can possibly get in the south. Because like I said, the hours are short. So you could do it in partial shade, 4-hour shade, but you're gonna have more something that you'll use for chives. And having said that, you can cut, when the green starts coming up here, you can cut that and go ahead and put that on your whatever you want. And the onion's gonna make another one. Now keep in mind, if you keep doing that, your onion might not get as big, it's probably gonna stay the same size. So do everything. Try some big onions, try some spring onions, get some just for chives. I dehydrate them. Does anybody have a dehydrator? You know how much onion powder's in the store now? It's ridiculous. Which the parts of the onion that you don't use when you chop, or if it's a little bit tougher, you can put in the dehydrator and then get you one of those ninjas and just, you know, yeah. And there you got onion powder. It's super easy to do. In a dehydrator, in the South, we're humid, so it takes a little bit longer. So, any questions about it?
So you always want them to stay on top of the soil like that?
Yes. So, as they get roots, they're going to want to bury themselves. But if they bury themselves, they're not going to get any bigger than what they are. It's like almost like they're in a suit, you know. You know, when those suits they used to put you in, you're like this, you can't get out. That's how they are. So yeah, they need to be right on top of the earth. So if it starts going down like this, what I'm gonna be doing is just pulling the dirt away from it, making a little cavity as I go. You can even pull some of the dirt back out. You know, just have your bucket and put the dirt back in there. It's not gonna be so. I mean, they're not gonna go straight down like that. So just a little bit here and there. When you're watering and you see a couple of them going down, just go ahead and pull that dirt back. It'll make a huge difference.
Will the squirrels bother the onions when they're sitting there? Do squirrels like onions?
Squirrels don't like onions,
Okay, good.
but if there's some acorns or something around, or they're trying to hide something, they could dig them up. But as a general rule, pretty much nothing except us likes onions I've seen. Now, I did have a cat yesterday take a turnip out of the ground and walk across the street with it. Yeah, I have no idea. It was holding it like it was a kitten, just walking like I got a turnip.
My dog wants to dig up onions and garlic.
Oh, wow. And the onions are not good for dogs. I don't know about garlic. I think garlic's fine.
Yeah.
Garlic is too? Okay, yeah. So, yeah, not a good thing. And the dogs also like to get into the black cow, and they love this stuff too.
Okay, good
Yeah,
to know.
because it's good and stinky.
I don't let them in my garden when I'm not there.
No, not at all. And so when you fertilize them with this, I'm going to show you how much for a bed, like, so just about like that. Was that about 1/4 of a cup maybe?
For the whole bed.
For the whole bed. Because onions aren't going to need a whole lot. Especially if you're using your homemade fertilizer. You just sprinkle it on just like that. And what don't you do after this?
Water.
Water. Yeah, you can water like normal, but don't try to make it disappear. Because that's not going to work. You can also plant onions around other plants like collards, cabbage, and it'll kind of repel some of the bugs and some of the critters that don't like onions. It'll keep them away too. I've seen that it helps with voles and moles a lot. It also tends to keep back grub worms. So if you're planting in the ground and you've got other crops, plant the onions, you know, along with them. They're not going to outcompete as long as you keep them a little bit farther away from the stem.
Is there anything you shouldn't plant near onions?
I'd say like mint or something that's going to totally take over strawberries. I wouldn't do that because you don't want them competing with the onions. The onions have little small roots, so if you've got something with big roots, it's going to take all the nutrients away from them.
What about garlic?
Garlic, the biggest thing is if you plant it with your onions, just remembering which is which, because you don't want to pull the dirt away from your garlic. And if you're like me, I forget what I plant, and I'm like, oh, that's a garlic. Oops. But no, garlic is also good with planting along other stuff. One thing to touch about the garlic, a lot of people tell me I planted garlic and nothing happened when I pulled it up. Well, you got to dig it up too. And same principle, feed it. Super important. Does anybody want to come up and plant some onions? Yes, y'all do. Come on.
Go ahead.
I answered that question for you. And that way I can make sure y'all doing it right. And if it's a smushy onion, just throw it in there. That's good nutrients.
And so approximately how, like when we do this, if we did this weekend, when When do you think we would expect to have a
big onion.
a baseball size onion or a plum size onion
A plum size next year.
next year?
Yeah,
So 1 year
March.
from, and so March. Okay.
March. Yeah, no, not
Not
1
a
year
year,
from,
but
yeah, yeah,
spring.
yeah.
Okay, got you.
So
And you can eat them at any size. So you know, pull them up. I like them better small. Like I said, I eat potatoes, so they just work perfect on the potatoes. And this is
So if
perfect.
it already has a shoot, it
Oh,
doesn't
look,
matter.
It's got a baby. Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're fine.
You can still. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Yeah,
how
yeah.
would you, cause like we have 2 dogs, how would you keep like your dogs away from that? Cause they would go into that. Cause they like
They
anything
will. They'll
sticky.
go and have a good time, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Probably the best thing is gonna be a fence,
Okay.
like a little fence around it.
Cool.
I think the chicken wire is pretty cheap.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I would. You might have to invest in that. And you could just fill up this whole bed with these things. Yeah. So just barely on top. Good job.
Yeah.
Do you want to try some? Come on over, y'all.
If you didn't do like a raised bed and you didn't do in the ground, like those tubs, like because I have a dog that I know, or even my toddlers,
They
right,
do
who will,
great.
like- so, is there a way? I've seen people like stack like tree branches in the bottom and cardboard, so you're not
Yeah.
putting so much
And
soil
leaves.
in.
Yeah.
Like so, you would do that maybe like half. Like how many? I guess inches for the roots.
The
do you
onions
need?
don't need, but maybe about like that much.
Okay.
So yeah, you could fill. And right now, people are throwing out their leaves. That is gold. So if you see a bag of leaves, grab it. Now, if it's a yard that's got a lot of pine trees in it, don't mess with that. But leaves are gold, y'all. I mean, it's just it makes. And if you have clay soil or even sandy soil, and you keep layering that stuff, it's going to turn into fantastic, beautiful soil in no time, just like that. You can see some of these wood chips that we've got. We dumped them a year ago, and if you look and reach into there, it's good dark soil now. So you want your soil brown to black, and it can have a lot more sand in it for onions. So, and a kitchen garden is great with these little things. You can have them right in the window, and as they get the little greens, you just chop, and throw it in there. In a little container. A smaller container is not going to make the big onion, but it's also just, they're so versatile, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that you can just set them in the windowsill, chop them up, put them in any dish you want.
Yeah, I've seen there's always hack videos, and I've always seen it in for green onions because I use green onions on damn near
Yeah.
everything. And I saw one where it's like, oh, this is how you can basically put them in water in like cups and put them on your windowsill, and
Yeah.
they'll just grow and grow.
And they do okay like that. The problem is they get moldy
I would
real
think so.
quick.
Yeah.
But doing that with the soil would be better.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of soil in there would work perfect. Yes, I tried it both ways. And green onions and spring onions, pretty much the same thing. And like I said, a big onion and a spring onion is the exact same thing. It just depends on when you plant it and how
You water it.
deep
long
you plant it.
let it grow.
Yep, and how you water it. If you water it too, yeah. So just like that. If you don't care about a spring onion, I still would come out and take some of the dirt away, because eventually, in about 3 months, it's going to be like this, and it's going to look like a piece of grass. Which is okay if you want chives, that's fine. But like I said, a very, very versatile thing. We have the short growing season onions here, which means they don't need as much sunlight, but if you got the long growing season, they just will not do in the south whatsoever. So always get short growing season. And we also have Egyptian walking onions. We're sold out right now, but they're kind of cool. They do not make a big onion. But what's cool about them is when they reproduce, they've got the seed head and it turns into little baby onions, and then it replants itself. So those are really, really cool. Most of these onions, if you let them sit there in the ground for like 2 years, they're going to start splitting sideways. So it'll be almost like a garlic bulb. And then they get mealy. The reason you don't harvest them in the summertime or when it's hot like this is they get really mealy. And one of my favorite things to do is after a frost, go right out there and grab them. They are so sweet right after the frost. I mean, it is amazing. If you've never done that before, you need to do it. It's really, really good.
And how do you harvest the seeds for planting next year?
Yeah, so you'll wait till the summertime. It's going to put a seed head on there that kind of looks not really like, have you seen garlic seed head or what do you call it, the dandelions? It's going to kind of a little bit look like that, just on a smaller scale. What you're going to do is just keep coming out there and checking on it. When it gets real dried up is when the seeds are going to be there.
Okay.
So the stalks start drying and the top's going to be dry, and then you can cut it. The reason we don't do them by seeds is it's so hard here to do by seeds because, again, long hours, cool weather is needed. So it's going to grow vastly slower here by seed. It's just going to take a long time. But experiment with it, push the envelope, have fun. Most of the stuff I do here is like somebody tells me I can't do it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Remember, you're a scientist. So if something doesn't work, don't be like, well, Derek, I can't plant onions. I'm never doing it again. Ask your why. Am I fertilizing too much? Do I have it in the wrong location? Did the sun move on me? Because, you know, the sun in the sky is going to be different and you might be in the shade. So keep an eye out on the sun and which way it goes because you want this in full sun. So doing it in pots, if you're not real sure about the sun, is great because you can move it around. So that works out really well. I plant onions everywhere. I mean, it's ridiculous. I know I plant and 450 pound of potatoes and probably a 50-pound bag of onions because I just love them so much. So, any other questions? Yes.
Pests. So, like planting our first garden, new to South Carolina, I learned about a lot of new bugs.
Oh yes, and there isn't a bug season in South Carolina. They're almost year round.
yes, we've learned that. So what are like not good friends to onions, or do we see that during the cold?
I have never had anything mess with the onion.
Okay.
No bugs, no nothing. Knock on wood. I'm knocking. No, yeah. If you get the soil too wet, so like what I said, if you water it too much, and the onions start to rot, it could get maggots and stuff in there. So just be really, really careful about how much you water, and that'll attract flies too. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate y'all coming out. Don't forget to pick up your onion kit. We do sell these online also. These kits come with the onions, the directions, a sample of the fertilizer, and we gonna have our kit for the sugarcane coming up also. So please check that out. Thank y'all.